Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you a well, something special in terms of a bat rep. So with my ongoing Unlocking Age of Sigmar series, I started showing some stuff that I was doing with my son in terms of building up his new army, and it seemed to get a lot of responses. A lot of people were very interested in seeing more about how to teach their own kids and how that's going. And I really appreciate the response. My son was extremely he was very happy to hear like all the nice positive comments too, and he really enjoyed putting out the couple of videos that I put out regarding that. So I wanted to give an update not only on where I am with helping him build his army. Yes, I'm probably doing most of the work, but he is helping, and he is young, so it's an ease into it. I don't want it to be unfun. But I also did a battle report, just kind of showing him and telling him, showing him how to play the game, and really going just a basic, simple game. And amazingly enough, some people really wanted to see this. So I'll show you how that turned out, and we can go through, kind of where the evolution of Ethan's army, Ethan's Ogres are as well. And here's a look at where the army is now. So it started out, and you're going to see in this really short battle report that most of his stuff is obviously not painted. Hell, even some of my stuff is not painted. But we've been growing his army just a little bit, little by little, just with a few add-ons, and there's still a couple of things that we haven't completed yet. So we started out with him just. One of the greatest things about Age of Sigmar is you just go into a store, whether you're an adult or a little kid, and just pick what you want, and you can put it on the table and play right there. And that's just one of the greatest things about any kind of a game, that you don't have this inhibition or barrier of entry. So whether you're an adult player looking to come into Age of Sigmar from 8th edition, whether you're somebody new who's never played this before, you don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, unless you want to actually bring something in and actually play. So when we started out, my first thing, and anybody who's seen the previous videos saw that my son, his first thing he saw was the giant. He loved the giant, so we're going heavy on giants. And then he liked the mastodon. The first thing he thought of was Lord of the Rings, the Oliphants, and of course Manny from Ice Age. And he said, I'd love to have one of those. I was like, all right, great. I'd love to have one of those too. So let's go do that. And we started out with that, and the first thing we actually bought was a unit of bulls. Now, some people commented, oh, why didn't you go with Iron Guts? They're so much stronger. They're really, really good, stat-wise compared to the bulls. Let me tell you, this was on the shelf. My son picked it. It was a starter set. I wasn't going, and still not going, based on what's better than what and how, to crush your opponents. I did steer my son a little bit towards one of the formations, which is the Avalanche. But who cares if the Iron Guts are better than the than the Bulls? I wanted to get a couple Ogres on the table with him and paint them up, and they're easy to paint. So I appreciate that comment. If it was me in my army, I understand that. But for a little kid, he's just going to pick whatever he thinks looks cool. And of course, when he saw the Mastodon, he was like, what's that version of what I can build? And that was the Stonehorn. When I started telling him about the Stonehorn, he's like, can we build that too? And of course I explained to him, well, we need to get another kit, because it only has parts to make one and some extras for some of the other options. So what do you think happened? We bought another kit. Same thing with the Giant. We bought a Giant. It was sitting unbuilt. I bought some bits for a second one for the same reason. I bought for the Stonehorn the extra, body parts, so that I can take the Stonehorn head and some of the other modular parts and put them together so I can make a second kit. So that's what we're working on. And of course, Mornfang, when I showed him all the different, pieces in this army, he liked the Mornfang. They were supposedly boar riders. They're apparently not. They're just cats with, giant tusks. They look almost more like giant saber tusks, big saber-toothed tiger types. But they at a distance, they certainly look like gigantic boars. So we got a couple of units of those. We started out with 2, and you can see they're on the new Monster Cab type bases. But I got an extra box just because we wanted to flesh it out, and they're going to be 3 in each of those 2 units to fulfill the avalanche. I'm not sure what else we're going to get. I might get another giant because again there was some foreshadowing in one of the scenario books that you might be able to get a herd of giants, and that could be a nice option. Also, he just loves the giants, and I got to tell you, I've played this army a couple of times myself. I borrowed my son's army. Yes, that is an option. Yeah, it was really cool. I got tabled completely against a massive chaos army, but one of those giants did take out a bloodthirster with his when he died and collapsed and did mortal wounds after he just basically just a wall of flesh fell on a bloodthirster. Even though I got beat terribly in that game, great moment, and that's what these games are about, by the way. So yeah, we got another giant coming. It's actually a good deal I got on one that was already pre-painted. I'll probably just adjust it a little bit, maybe do some additional painting. And we're just starting out with the kind of the fleshy parts, and then eventually we'll we'll move to some higher details. I'm obviously doing the vast majority of the work, but I'm trying to get Ethan in, with doing some of the washes after we do the flesh and some of the other stuff, and all the details like fine details and highlighting I'll be taking care of. So this is the army. It's not a bad looking army already. It's this is a whole massive meat wall. it's just scary to see on the table, but it's an interesting just how small the model count is, especially when I think of how much I have in my vampire counts, which is just a massive volume of stuff. In any case, so when I first did this, we actually did a game. And he didn't even have half the stuff that's here, even in box form. So again, by popular demand, here is the battle report with Ethan's army. Now here is Ethan, and this is really what just his deployment was. We had just finished building the Thunder Tusk, which is a scary model, and of course we put together his bull, the unit of bulls. Now again, this isn't even base coated. I didn't even put the Thunder Tusk yet on a base. So I put together in the living room with one of the nice cigar mats, which I love because you can kind of put hills underneath and you can see some real topography. I use it mostly for the historical games, but I'm using it now also for some of my my Age of Sigmar games. So here he is, and he's just thrilled to get in a game, and I'm just teaching him just the basic concepts. Here's we didn't really even go with anything like sudden death. We didn't have enough model count for it anyway, and I made sure I didn't put out more stuff that would make that possible. But it was really just here's how the movement works. Here's how here's what the terrain is, and here's what the board looks like. This is what we're gonna here's some trees. We didn't even roll up anything on what the trees were in terms of special stuff. You don't want on low overload even a new adult player, much less a kid. And you can deploy up to this point. Here's what we do with the tape measure in terms of measuring distances, and we looked over the stats, and we just took it slow. And mostly I was telling him what his options were and letting him choose, and eventually he'll just start making the choices on his own. But he really started picking this up as we got through the game. So I have a unit of Crypt Horrors at the bottom, a unit of Vargeists, and then a unit of Direwolves. And Direwolves are much better in Age of Sigmar than they used to be. They're still fast moving, but they're actually no slouch. Now I have more models on the table, but he's got a lot more how should I put it? He's got more wounds, I would say, in total, it's a pretty comparable army. But you'll see how this turns out. It goes south for me really quickly. So he gets first turn, and here's his Thunder Tusk, and then of course his 6-man unit of bulls. And we didn't even bother with any magic. Of course, it's just too much. It's just we're just trying to teach movement. So again, this is a very remedial and very basic battle report. Again, we're teaching a 9-year-old kid how to play. So if and this was several weeks ago. This has got to be a good 3 weeks back. So if you've seen other battle reports that have much more complexity, just know that some of the early battle reports that I did were and I think I was one of the first people to use the rugby scrum as an example. You just kind of coalesce in the middle, and things have advanced so much more since then. So this is a very basic game with just a couple of units. Maybe you just picked up a couple of boxes you came back from the store, put it together, and you got together with a friend who has some other stuff, and you just put stuff on the table. Or this is the most that you've actually gotten built to this point, and you want to get a game in. So think of it in those terms. if you add in scenarios, objectives, if you have more in-depth board, terrain on the board, certainly the game is going to be much more complex. But this is going to be pretty basic otherwise. So here's my my deployment. I put on the far side 5 of the dire wolves, and I decided to keep in the center. This is my converted army for Bretonnian themed vampire counts. So they're not complete, of course, but these Vargeists are meant to have riders on top of them. They're kind of like I call them instead of Pegasus Knights, these are my Pegasus Whites. So I can also double them as if I want to use this army as a Bretonnian army, but I don't do that very often. And then to the far side are the Crypt Horrors, which are basically my my werewolf Crypt Horrors. Okay, so let's see. I think what happens is, yeah, here's the board, and we go ahead and roll off. So you just get a sense of, there's a couple of trees and some hills, and really just a few units on the table. And he deployed where he wanted to. I gave him, the marker of where it stopped, the maximum, and that's where he decided to put stuff. So the Ogres get turn 1, and of course Ethan decides he's going to move his Ogres right up into the tree line. And I think that his thought was that his Ogres are bigger than the wolves, but they're not bigger than the guys with the wings. So he wanted to move them over to kind of get a mismatch, which is pretty cool. I thought that was a pretty insightful of him. And then he moves straight up his Thunder Tusk, and he knew right off the bat that this thing can shoot some stuff. So he was ready to level whatever he could at the and I put the tape measure down, and I said you have a maximum range of X. Model to model is the way we were playing, and of course he went after the scary looking werewolves. And completely kills one with the ice breath and does a couple wounds on one of the remaining ones. So I'm already down one of my Crypt Horrors. Wow, that mortal wounds on that thing is crazy. I think he missed with his other stuff, and then it became my turn. So turn 1 for the vampire counts. So I move up the direwolves into the wood line. I'm up on a hill. There's really no benefit or advantage really right now. I repositioned a couple of the trees just to get these guys in there. But I'm at the maximum for his charge, or roughly so. Where he'd have to roll pretty good for a charge, and I don't want to get charged by those bulls, because those bulls are they get extra bonuses if they're on the charge, very similar to what you would see in 8th edition. And then I flew up my my Vargeists, because I knew that that he was going to go and charge in, but I flew him up to the point where I wanted to try and get a charge in this turn, and hopefully, get some hurt on that big mastodon. If I can knock him down a few pegs, his ice breath isn't quite so bad. It becomes die rolls as opposed to just a blanket 6 mortal wounds, and he's going to remove at least 1 model a turn with that, maybe 2. So, and then I move up, of course, the Crypt Horrors. And then, of course, I do. Now, look, you don't need to declare charging in this game in the same way as 8th. I just put down the markers just because it's cool to see on a battle report, and it's easy to keep track of even when at the table. But you don't need that, because when you roll a charge, you're really rolling just for the range. As long as you're within range, 12 inches of anything, you can charge it. But if you're in range of multiple things, you could charge. You can make up your mind after you've made the roll, because if you could have made something that's further away, you could charge that instead of something closer. You don't have to declare a unit against a specific unit. You just declare that a unit is charging. But dire wolves only had charge range against 1 unit, and that was the bulls. And then, of course, I charged everything else. I'm certainly within range for both of these guys. Much longer range for the Crypt Horrors. And the direwolves make it in. So, I'm able to get the direwolves in so that they can start doing some damage against the bulls, hopefully knock one of the bulls out. And I fail with everything else. They weren't tremendously long charges, especially for the Vargeists. But, yeah, that's where the dice rolls are going. Clearly, the dice are in favor of the younger, either the kid who's learning the new game and certainly wants to pound his dad into the dust in a new war game. So, yeah, that was a thing. he definitely was happy about that I didn't get in there, because he knew reasonably well that if I got in there first that I'd have a little bit more of an advantage. So I pile in when we get to combat with my, and I don't have any shooting. I pile in with the wolves, so they get spread out, so they can start bearing down on these ogre bulls. And I don't think I killed any of the ogre bulls, but I did 3 wounds on one of them, so he's just barely alive. And then he fights back. He goes and he piles in, gets, the back rank, a little bit closer. I explained to him how it worked, so it was pretty intuitive. It wasn't really hard. And he wipes out 2 of the dire wolves easily. I mean, the dire wolves are way overmatched, but so what? I'm hoping to do some damage. I don't know. I put dire wolves against bulls. What do you think would happen? So we roll off again to see who gets the turn 2, because it's an alternating random. No, it's not an alternating. It's a random for each turn who might go first. And he gets the first turn. So now it seems like we're alternating. It really hasn't been an advantage. If I went again next, it would have been pretty big and positive for me. And I forget what this this was the roll. So I rolled a 5 and he pulled out a 6. So yes, the kids power for dice rolling is still a thing. So he moves up as close as he can with his Thunder Tusk. Of course he's going to try and charge in on them, but before he's going to do that, he's going to do a little shooting. But now he's got these big scary batwing, flying guys in front of him, and he has a giant mastodon, a Thunder Tusk that he wants to go and charge in with. Why wouldn't he? So he goes and shoots, and he's doing the right thing. I mean, he's just whittling down these Cryptars. They're, the Cryptars have a little more staying power than the Vargheists, but good decision making by Ethan here to just continue to batter this other unit, so that if it does get in on the fight, it's going to get weakened. It might even take a battle shock test, and I might even lose the next guy. It's just he didn't even realize that element. But the idea from a 9-year-old to basically say, I've already wounded this one, I'm about to charge that one, let me go blast these guys, maybe I'll kill them all off, and then I'll take care of this one in close combat. He's already getting some of the basic concepts of strategy. And in Age of Sigmar, there's a lot of strategy in terms of the order of which you do things, as opposed to in previous editions, it was more of an initiative based thing, or there was a special rule for some units that automatically would get to strike first. Here you get to pick, and the order of which you pick is very, very important. So he goes and charges in, and of course he makes it, because he only would have failed on Snake Eyes, and 9-year-olds don't fail Snake Eyes, fail tests where you have to roll a 3 or more. And so the Thunder Tusk gets in on these guys. You can see there's only one of the Cryptars left, and then we get into combat. So combat starts. He piles in with some of his other bulls to wrap around the remainder of the dire wolves. And he only kills off one dire wolf, but he does do a wound on another. So, I lost another dire wolf. I don't think I lost any to any battle shock in the previous turn. So I get to go, and then my suggestion would probably have been start with the Thunder Tusk. And I probably did make that suggestion, but I think he decided, he made the decisions. Because then the Thunder Tusk takes a chance of getting wounded, and then maybe its profile is a little weaker. So, that worked in my favor. I then wrapped around with my Vargheist, so I get more of them, more models to bear on this Thunder Tusk, which is easily the most powerful thing on the table. And I dish out, it looks like 4 wounds. So that's going to drop him 1, maybe 2 rungs on the ladder in terms of some of his power. This is my turn, so he's not going to get to shoot. So he fires back, and of course he kills one of the Vargheists and does 2 wounds on the next one. So that was pretty powerful. I think he might have flubbed one of his rolls, but he did well enough with the the stomping type power of the hooves and everything else that he's already starting to drop models on this unit. So the direwolves fight back, and they were able to drop one. It was only 1 wound on one of these bulls, but I don't think I had done any damage to his bulls previously. And a couple extra wounds carried over to another one of the bulls. So now he's only down 1 bull, and I'm only sitting at 2 direwolves. Not a good situation. So here's where we stand. At this point in the battle. I've almost lost completely my Cryptar unit. My Direwolf unit is just about getting wiped out. He's only down one model, one of his bulls, and he's got a weakened Thunder Tusk. I've lost one of my Vargeists, but we still have got some plenty of stuff on the board to really make a fight of it. So we then comes my turn. So this is the bottom of turn 2. Vampire counts. And, I move up the last remaining Cryptar. He has to stop 3 inches away, but now he's in a, almost a gimme charge. And we get to the to charging, and of course he charges in and is able to make it. And we get to combat, and I forget which one of these I activated. I think I activated the Cryptar, because if the Cryptar dies, if I don't use him now and he attacks the Cryptars, which he's almost certainly going to do, he's that one guy is not going to get a chance to fight back. At least if he has a choice then to attack the Vargeists, at least the most he'll do is probably remove one or two bodies, but then there'll still be guys to attack back. So I open up with the Cryptar, and I did another wound. Yay! So he attacks back with, I think he splits some of his attacks. We were talking about this, that he had a bunch of attacks. He didn't have to focus everything on one unit. So he decides, and he could have declared this all at once or done it one at a time. It really is up to him. But he decided he wanted to put some of these attacks on the Cryptar, and of course he only did one wound to him. The bulls... Oh, I think that was the end of the fight. I think we may have, we may be at a situation here where a lot of these rolls were flubbed back and forth. But it looks like this was a battle shock test, because I have a 10 die roll there. So yeah, the wolves died to battle shock. They didn't die from even the hand-to-hand combat. And now we're looking at Ogre's turn 3. So as you can see, obviously it must have been that I think maybe he may have focused all of his attacks previous turn from the Thunder Tusk against that one Cryptar, just to try and get rid of him. And either he may have missed on some of his rolls, or I made my saves. So that must have been what had happened there. So now here we are at Ogre's turn 3. He's got 6 wounds now, probably from one of the attacking back of the Vargeists, and apparently I must have put another wound on. I must have missed a picture. Apologies. So those bulls are now free to make a move because there's no direwolves next to them. But I've got the Thunder Tusk pretty well surrounded, and he's now down to like what, about half strength, I think it is. So he moves his bulls right up into the combat to the closest he could. He was able to do so, he's within 3 inches now to charge into the Vargeists. And I think what it looks like here is that I've lost one of, or maybe even 2 of the Vargeists, and there's an extra wound on the other. So now we're in combat, and I think he starts off with his Thunder Tusk, and he's just ripping apart the Vargeists. And obviously he rolled pretty well. So there we go. I only have 1 fresh Vargeist left. Looks like the bulls were stranded out of combat because of where I pulled off the wounded, the casualties, which is a tactic. He didn't get a chance to pile in yet, so now he's completely out of that 3-inch arc. So even though he was in an almost default charge range, now he's out of combat. So yeah, I used a few tactics on him, just trying to show him what you can do in these situations. And I'm sure that that will resonate. But he's doing pretty well, okay? Even with me pulling out one of these, it's totally legal. It's not cheesy at all, and it is a total strategy in terms of how you play, where you take off your wounds, try and maximize what you do and minimize what your opponent does back. But you look at the board here. He's only lost 1 model, and I'm almost wiped out here. So I go ahead and I guess I was wrong. So in terms of measuring, I guess his pile-in was close enough for the Vargeist, but after the casualties left, he was stranded from them, but not stranded from the Cryptar. So I guess he was able to pile in with the bulls into the Cryptar. And or maybe I'm getting this out of order. I mean, he charged into the Cryptar. So yes, this wasn't a pile-in situation. I guess he had charged in, and I may have not taken the picture where he actually did the charge. So we go back, and I think he does some the Thunder Tusk unloads on the last remaining Vargeist, who only takes 1 wound. But with some follow-up attacks, he's able to finish him off. Goodbye, Vargeist. Now I only have one Cryptar left who has one wound, on 1 out of 4, I believe, wounds total removed. He's still at 3 wounds, but he's absolutely swarmed right now by a unit of almost full strength bulls and a still wounded but still alive Thunder Tusk. I think he might have like 7 wounds on him now. And now, yeah, the Cryptar goes and rips into the Thunder Tusk, just hoping that he might get lucky and finish him off. And as you can see, there's 9 wounds on this Thunder Tusk, so no, I fell short. There's no way that I would have finished him off. But he's got 9 wounds on him, and I just was hoping that if I got lucky enough, maybe I would have been able to drop it. That probably would have been pretty dramatic in the game, but the game is pretty well lost at this point. So it was really cool. He goes and he wraps around with these, with the Remainder of the Bulls. And gets the maximum number of guys in. I was showing him how the mechanic worked, and now, again, this last Cryptar is just swarmed, and obviously they destroy him. So that's the game. This is the last shot of the game, but let me just explain a couple of things. You don't have to have this massive elaborate game with a lot of units on the table and use every different aspect of the game. Shooting and magic you can leave for later incarnations of the game with somebody that's new, especially with a kid who you just want to get the concept of movement, charges, how rolls work, what's the concept of saves, rolls to hit, how to measure, all that stuff. And it's really easy to do because you don't have to worry about wheeling and line of sight stuff. And this really was a nice intro. He's been asking me to play another game since then, and we're certainly going to do one with obviously a few more units, and things are going to be a little bit more painted, so it'll be a little bit more interesting visually for everybody there. So here you go. This is Ethan, who was thrilled to show his Thunder Tusk not only survived but just wrecked. Just anything it touched, it was just wrecking. And the takeaway for this is that whatever your thoughts are about Age of Sigmar, and if you're not interested in Age of Sigmar, I don't know why you're watching this video, but welcome if you are, and of course thank you for tuning in. If you're generating, if it might spark some interest for you, but this is a game that it has 2 thoughts to it. It's really easy for new players, especially for kids, but even new players that are adults. It's easy to pick up, and that's one of the things that is important when you think about getting into a new game. If you have literally a college textbook, 2-inch thick giant red book that you have to absorb, even though most of it is pictures and diagrams, it's a lot to take in when you first want to play. But if you have something that's relatively basic in its concepts, even a young kid could come in, learn some of the simplest aspects of the game, and be able to enjoy the concept of a war game, and and having monsters and dragons and vampires and ogres and all whatever stuff that you have, cavalry and spearmen and whatever you're putting on the table. If it sparks that interest, this is now something that will resonate and hopefully be something that will, be something you can enjoy with your kids or with, with your friends for some time if they haven't been into it before. If there was like if they were a little bit put off by the fact that they had to now study to learn in a game. But this game is complex enough that for adults, there's depth. It may not seem apparent when you first read that 4-page rule book, but once you start going through all the war scrolls and really ponder a lot of the rules in the 4-page rule book, as has been said in many other battle reports, but this one, there's a lot of nuances to movement, the concepts of retreating, the concepts of different types of geometrical formations and layers with different units, with different levels of reach. All these different things come into play, and you will discover that stuff in the course of play if you're inclined to do that. And so I feel like it's just important to note that even though it seems like it's a basic rule set, there's a tremendous amount of depth. So if you're craving something that you don't think is there for Age of Sigmar, if you give it a try, I think you might find it differently. If not, that's your preference, and more power to you. Whether you're sticking with 8th, whether you're moving on to a community-built adaptation of old 8th edition, which is the 9th Age, or whether you're jumping into Age of Sigmar, or whether you're playing any other game, whatever you find fun, more power to you. I appreciate you tuning in. And, to last note, to those, I had started up a Patreon account because I'm looking to try and upgrade my equipment, try and get more samples of items to go and promote for for the channel, and then try and get views and reviews before things actually even come out. And I was hoping to see if anybody wanted to contribute to that fact. I want to I've been invited to go to some shows and do some demos and the like. And I've already got some responses, which I want to thank. I just want to reach out to those few guys who are already supporting the channel. Thank you very much for that vote of confidence. And anybody else who is interested in doing it, you'll see a link to the Patreon account. It is not required. I'm not going to be doing some second layer of subscriber only, donator only content. I will not do that. I'm just going to continue doing this channel and try and improve the production quality. So just understand that. And if you're not interested in doing that, you're not in a position to do it, or you're not interested in doing it, no problem. That's fine. If you are, I just want to extend my thanks to you. I will be, kind of randomly giving away stuff as I start getting stuff. If anything's redundant or if it's not stuff that I use very much, I'm going to pass it on to the subscribers. And what I mean by subscribers is I want to pass it on to everybody who views and tunes in. Obviously, there's certain things that I'm probably going to be mostly giving over to people who actually donate via Patreon, which makes sense. But ultimately, I'm going to be also giving out stuff to just about anybody who tunes in and comments and stuff and is a subscriber. So thank you again for all the support, and it's just amazing how many people have been turning what initially was an overwhelming amount of really uncomfortability about AoS Sigmar by people who just didn't get it, but it's really turned a corner, and there's so many people that are pouring out with positive. And I just want to just tell you, everybody out there who's taking this with a positive view, and who's made just all those really great comments. Thank you so much for tuning in, and more to come, and have a great day, everybody.